Hello, welcome to the fourth episode of our Women Techmakers series. This is a series to share the stories of women who are luminaries in the tech world and to inspire more women to enter technology, and there's lots of resources in our Google Developer Network to learn how to do just that. Today, I'm thrilled to be here with a very special guest and a great co-host. But our guest is Diane Greene, a Google board member and the founder of a couple of companies, but more recently, founder and former CEO of VMware. So we'll have Diane introduce herself in a minute. I'm Claire Hughes-Johnson. I lead our Google Offers product. I've been at Google for almost 9 years, and I've worked on a variety of products on both the consumer and the business product side in both sales and product, so I have a little bit of a different background. I live in Menlo Park, and I have two lovely children and a husband named Jessie, which is interesting because my co-host today is named Jessie. And I would love Jessie Jiang to introduce herself.
Great. Thank you, Claire. My name is Jessie Jiang. I'm a product management director in Google Cloud Platform. Google Cloud Platform provides a set of services for developers to build and run their applications in Google's cloud. Some of our products include Google App Engine, Google Compute Engine, Storage, Cloud SQL, and BigQuery. I've been at Google for about 7 years, not as long as Claire. It's always been very exciting to be here. I have a daughter. She's 4 years old. I actually think your son and my daughter go to the same school. Anyway, so I'm very excited to be here today and to be part of this interview with Diane. I'm sure she has some really inspiring stories to share with all of us.
So with that, let's hear from Diane Greene. A little bit of your background would be great.
Okay, hello, I'm Diane Greene, and it is great to be here. And I actually started as an engineer. I have a degree in mechanical engineering and naval architecture, and worked in the oil and shipping industry for a while before I decided to go back to school and study computer science and have a computer science degree, and then moved into tech probably 25 years ago and worked in the industry in the database and a little bit hardware, and in 1995 I started doing startups, and I've done 3 startups. The first was a low bandwidth video streaming startup that Microsoft bought and became the basis for their movie player. And another one was in internet ad serving, a company called AdForce. And then the last one was VMware, which I started the same year Google was founded, and co-founded with 4 other people, and stayed with VMware for 11 years, got it to about $2 billion and about 7,000 people, and it's a virtualization company.
And were you the CEO for the?
Yes, I was the CEO, founding CEO of VMware, and built the company as a CEO. Right.
Wow. Well, so we're very lucky to have Diane here.
Yeah.
We thought we'd start with a little bit about the innovation and the technology that was behind VMware. And I would love to have Jessie lead this section since she works on this type of work at Google.
Yeah, this is why I'm so excited to be here today. So cloud computing is one of the biggest trend in technology today, and virtualization is in the center of it. VMware obviously is a pioneer in virtualization. You co-founded the company and was a CEO for many years. So maybe we can start by having you tell us a little bit about your story there.
Well, we had this insight. There was research going on at Stanford by my co-founder and husband, Mendel Rosenblum, around revisiting the idea of virtualization. IBM had done it in the 60s. For different reasons, when computers were extraordinarily expensive and a precious resource. And we had the idea that it would be useful for all kinds of compartmentalization and providing levels of indirection, and we can go more into that. But if we brought it to mainstream processors, to the Intel processor. And so we decided to do that. It was difficult because virtualization had died out. The Intel processor had no hardware support for virtualization because people thought it was the thing of the past. But we got it working on the Intel processor, and were able to bring it to market, and it did become the basis of a large virtualization industry. That's right.
That's great.
Yeah.
I actually heard a little bit about this story, but I think that one of the very interesting thing about VMware is it's actually started as a company that much more focused on the client side. And I think I also heard that you have always known that the server side is where the future of VMware was going to be. So maybe you can delve a little bit more into that story and see how you decided your first step and then how you became, lead the company to become successful on the server side.
Sure. Yeah, we thought this virtualization was incredibly useful, and we thought from day one that it was really needed on the servers as a way to provide isolation. I mean, the things, operating systems were only running one application per operating system at the time, and that was wasting. I mean, machines were running about 5 to 10%, and there was security and fault isolation problems and all kinds of resource isolation problems. But we knew we couldn't go into the enterprise with a product that ran everybody's software and have people trust us and deploy us. And we had to get a lot of credibility, so we decided we would we came up with an architecture where we would take advantage of the Windows operating system on the desktop for all its device drivers, and we decided to introduce it as, right then Linux was gaining a lot of traction, and we knew that all the developers running Linux needed a way to run their Windows applications. This is, back in 1998, 99. And so we introduced it as a way to run Windows applications while you were running Linux and be able to run them side by side, with the idea that these developers would give us great bug reports.
That's a good idea.
And so we launched it as a desktop, but I have to say we did a vision statement when we founded the company, and in it we said, this will be ubiquitous by the year 2000. We were off by a few years, but it did become ubiquitous.
That's very good.
Yeah.
That's great. We were actually talking about the some of the other virtualization technology right before this started, like Zen and KVM and all that. And cloud computing in general is really, in many ways are changing how people are doing things. So what do you feel like the cloud computing trend is going? What do you think are some of the maybe predicting what's the next set of new innovations that might come out either in the field of cloud computing or as a result of the cloud computing?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of major changes going on, as I think we all know. We're all involved in a very exciting time. In the infrastructure, in the hardware space, there's all kinds. People are rebuilding hardware to be optimized for virtualization, virtualized storage, virtualized networking, and that's all very active. And at the system level, ways to manage a data center where it looks like one big compute resource, using oftentimes the virtualization. But the cloud, part of what's making this cloud, I think, so exciting is that all of a sudden all the data and compute is in a place where you can access it from anywhere, from any device. And the devices have a lot of sensors, and so human-computer interaction is becoming much more human-like. And the cloud is the cloud with the mobile devices is making it possible. And there's some big trends there.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let me just ask one more cloud computing questions, and then I'm going to turn this to Claire, because I think there are a lot of people probably eager to hear about your stories on being entrepreneur, leadership, and management. So VMware is a very, very successful enterprise company, and you have a lot of experience in terms of working enterprises. Given the trend in cloud computing and some of the other technology innovations, how do you think that enterprise should approach their technologies these days? Are there things you felt like they should do differently?
Well, enterprises are trying to build data centers that are cost effective, and they're trying to centralize all their services, so it's easier to administer and have single sign-on, have single view of all the data, and so forth. And so to the support to build a data center with the cost effectiveness of the big services like Google, like Amazon, and so forth is not there yet. But that is what enterprises are trying to do, and more they're going to be able to get these services from external hosting external providers. Yep. And some of the challenges of running these hosting centers around security, around uptime, and cost effectiveness, I think are going to push people to using external providers, because that's where the expertise in how to do this is going to be the highest. Mm-hmm. I think it's getting to the point where security is such a tough problem that unless you let the experts, each company can't have enough expertise to protect themselves, and it'll become very, it needs to get more sophisticated, and it will when the talent's centralized, I think.
That's a great point. Yeah. Very exciting.
Yeah.
Great. Well, let's we'll maybe come back to this, but let's talk a little bit about one thing you mentioned, which is the decision to go back to school and work in computer science.
Yeah.
So what led you to that decision?
Well, it was interesting. I was working. I love adventures, and I love being outside, and I had gone into the oil industry, and I was wanting to go to these offshore oil platforms, and in the North Rankin Sea, off the coast of Australia and the North Sea.
Those platforms that catch on fire. And
I actually got to work on Red Adair's mooring system for putting an oil rig out from a semi-submersible oil platform at one point. It was very interesting. But anyhow, they'd had no quarters for women at the time out on these platforms, and I was stuck doing all the computer analysis, which I thought, well, there's more interesting things to do with computers than hydrodynamics analysis, and that's not. And so I decided, when I had been studying naval architecture, I'd hung out at MIT with a lot of artificial intelligence people, and I'd been really interested in it, and I decided to go back to school and study it. So I went back to Berkeley and studied computer science.
Because you thought there could be more than just the data analysis piece. Like, you could do more, and
well, it just seemed like
more could be done with.
Computers were starting to get so capable that it was clearly revolutionizing our lives, and I wanted to be a part of it. Yeah.
And then when you co-founded VMware with your husband, he was a professor at...
No, we were both... Oh, yeah, yes. I met my husband at Berkeley, where we were both graduate students. Uh-huh. And then we co-founded the company when he was a professor at Stanford, right?
And I think you told me a story about how you kind of stepped in and said, well, I'll help run things. And then you ended up being CEO. What do you think? How did it go from, well, I'll help out, to realizing you were the best person to be the CEO?
Yeah, well, I had already been the CEO of a startup, yep. And I'd been involved in two, and I felt very comfortable getting them going. And I said, okay, and I really thought this was something worth bringing to market. I actually pushed. I said, let's bring this to market. This is really valuable. And but then I discovered I was pregnant. And so I said, well, I will help you get this out the door. I know how to build a startup, and then we'll have to find someone, because I'm about to have my second kid. And what it turned out was it was very easy to have my second kid and build the company all in a...
Because you were the boss.
Yeah, so it worked out. And I always said if I didn't think I was adding value, I would leave. But it went really well. We all liked each other. We were all making lots of progress all the time, and So
your daughter's the same age as VMware,
exactly,
essentially.
Yeah.
And you would bring her into work and occasionally, or when she was little, maybe?
She came into work a lot. I brought her all over the world with me. I would always hire a really good nanny in whatever city I went to, so that she would have more fun than me sometimes, getting to go out and see the city. She learned origami in Japan from her nannies, and it was really a great experience for her. And she's both of my kids are pretty savvy. They always surprise us with how much they know about how a tech company might be built.
Well, they saw it from the ground up.
Well, they just heard about nothing else at the dinner table.
That's probably what happened, yes.
So when you think about your leadership style and really scaling with VMware, right, from sort of startup world to a much larger company and enterprise, maybe you can talk about what were some of the lessons you learned or how you had to flex and adapt as a leader.
It was really a nice way to scale up as a leader because it was so incremental with the people that we hired. And one of the things I did was we had a lunch we brought in once a week and talked to everybody about what was going on in the company. And I wasn't that comfortable speaking in public when we started the company, and but it got bigger by a few people every week, and pretty soon it was 1,000 people and
at lunch. Probably evolved.
Probably about 500. We quit having everybody in one place, but that really scaled up. And then certainly when you're doing something like that, it's a constant process of figuring out what you don't need to do anymore and hiring someone else to do it and constantly shedding responsibilities.
And how much did you stay involved in the technology, in the thinking about what the product was going to be and how it was going to evolve?
Well, I always, all the way through, attended product meetings. And I felt like I couldn't run the company if I didn't really have a very grounded understanding of what we were doing, and I felt like I was helpful in the product review. I mean, not every product meeting, but the major product reviews about a new product or a new direction, because I was out in the field. I was seeing all aspects of how I was working with the partners, and so that was a valuable perspective for those product meetings.
Because as CEO, you were particularly external and probably talking to a lot of large partners or large customers.
I was focused really internally on the culture. I cared a great deal about that, but I also thought partners were so key to our being able to build the business. And I really enjoyed working with other companies and both of us kind of winning together. And so I stayed very active with our hardware partners. Yeah.
Got it. And when you think about whether maybe it was a partner or a mentor, but somebody who guided you as you went through this process, were there particular types of people that you turned to? I often hear that women feel they don't have a lot of examples, and I don't think the example or the mentor has to be a woman necessarily, but I don't know if you had any people that played an important role.
I watched everywhere. I mean, when we were partnering with the hardware companies, I got to work with a lot of senior executives, and I would say, particularly at IBM, I learned a lot from being with those executives. They were very sophisticated and really had a very 360-degree view of what they were doing. So I, in particular, tried to spend more time with some of those executives sometimes.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Was there any woman in particular who you looked to, or did you have
to
pave the way?
I was going to say no, but then I remembered that Sue Whitney was running the hardware, all the server stuff, the x86 server stuff at IBM, and so I got to be friends with her. So that was good.
That's great.
So VMware was the second company that you sort of started, and you had another one before that. Do you comparing the first one and the VMware? Do you feel like there was a difference between sort of doing it the first time versus doing it a second time?
Yeah, there was a huge difference doing it the second time. The first time was great, but we sort of had a vague idea, and we all started working on it. And as we got into the company, it kind of became clear that our vague idea, everybody had internalized a little bit differently, and it caused for a little bit of dysfunction in the company. And so the first thing I did when we started VMware was write our mission and vision and have everybody edit it and sign off on it before we kept going, so I knew we were all on the same page, and I found that very helpful.
So I assume
That's a good tip.
I assume you also made a lot of effort to make sure those visions are communicated to all the people in VMware as the company becomes bigger and bigger.
Yeah, someone once told me you can never over-communicate, and I've really taken that to heart. I mean, you can say things over and over again, and people don't seem to get tired of hearing it. You get tired of listening. Well, you just worry about boring them, but it turns out that important things can be said in many, many different ways over and over again. And so we did work very hard on keeping everybody in sync. In fact, one thing I used to always like to do was be the last on an interview schedule and ask the person, well, what did everybody tell you about our strategy? and find out
Another
if we
good
were
tip.
all in sync.
That's a good tip. Yeah.
I often ask people at Google, what do you think this job is? After they've met a few people, because sometimes they're not sure what they're interviewing for because we have such a diverse set of things in our roles at the company.
That's true.
So
Yeah, that outside perspective gives you a lot of clues.
when you think about maybe young people or developers just starting out interested in their skill sets and what experiences they might have, is there any particular point in your career you would say that was when I really learned the most or realized, this was my passion? Was it?
Well, I think for me, my passion was always seeing opportunities and pursuing them. When I would see, oh, this could be done way better, or something new could be done that would be really valuable. That's what I've always gravitated towards. I think when I started working in the tech industry, I found out that it was really easy to see something and just run with it. Because you could kind of go build something without it costing any money, particularly, and if it solved a problem, people would be really happy, or if it produced something that would be valuable to the company. So I got very excited about what was possible in terms of making a difference without having it to be highly structured. I think that's a huge advantage of the tech industry, and it just makes it much more merit-based.
Yeah, and very fast moving.
Yes, I actually many years ago I was on the board of a company in the retail space, and a very good company, but it was amazing to me the difference in the pace between the tech industry and this company.
Yeah, I think that has upsides and downsides, right? I mean, it's amazing to be in. I don't think I would go the other way, but we can work in very short cycles, and sometimes we get short-sighted because we're just trying to get the next thing done when there are big tectonic shifts happening, and it's important to be aware of both of those. Do you have any tips for when we're cycling really hard? I'm sure you had this at VMware, but at Google in particular, we sometimes feel like we're running 100 miles an hour, and it's important to step back.
Yeah. I mean, I always tried to sort of put in rituals that periodically let me and some of the people I worked with step back. And so we had a once a week where once a month, that once a week would kind of be a little more on the long term than the immediate. And then we had a cadence to some offsites we would do. And I also, one thing I really liked about travel was when I got on a plane, nobody would be asking me for anything, and I would really clarify my long-term thoughts whenever I traveled on a long flight.
Yeah. Don't tell my husband. I sometimes really actually like traveling, even though that means I'm not helping out at home as much. Jessie, do you have any?
So one of the things I love, this is actually come from some of my team members and all that. I was telling people, I'm interviewing Diane, so excited, and what are some things you love to know about? And some of these are women, and they said they love to know, like, what are some of the sort of things that you learned earlier in your career, which you thought are very helpful for your career, sort of many years after, because I think many of the people here at Google, we're very young, just starting. We love to learn things from you. Things you would like to advise us at this point of where we are.
Oh, gee, I sometimes feel like, how can I give advice to people at Google? They're so talented. But I mean, if I were myself giving myself advice when I started out, what would I have liked to have known? I would have appreciated what turned out to be true is when you produce quality advancement on whatever you're working on, good things happen, and it's to be reassured that is really the case, and to just have confidence to focus on doing very high quality, high value work, not just high quality but also high value work, and to test out your ideas about what's valuable. I think I was worried that things might not get appreciated sometimes, and they actually did, always, pretty much. Or I would leave. And that is a piece of advice, is if you're doing things and they're not having the effect that they should have, they're being held back for some reason that doesn't make sense to you, you just should go somewhere else where that's not going to happen. Don't stay in a situation where you're frustrated. And I never have. I've always been very quick to leave when I felt frustrated.
This was like you're being the data analyst story. You then said, hey, I could be doing a lot more. Computers could do a lot more. You weren't feeling the value and the impact.
Yeah, well, I can remember a job I had in a database company where I was building some tools that were doing some really useful things for the people in customer support, and there were people, and the customer support people loved it, but there were people that were worried about the use of these tools. Or I remember, when I was a naval architect, I remember writing, doing a program to do the hydrostatic analysis, and the naval architect I was working for didn't trust, this was very extreme, didn't quite trust computers yet, and thought I should check it by hand. And that was a point when I said, okay, I think I'll go somewhere else, where I can, anyhow. So it's really just a matter of keep moving if you feel like you're being held back. But if you're doing excellent work, chances are it will be appreciated, and just don't be afraid to look around and see how to make things better.
It's very good advice.
Yeah, that's great. So you joined the Google board a year ago?
Yeah, not quite a year ago.
Almost a year ago.
Yeah.
I'm sure, and you and I have talked about this, you get a lot of board invitations.
Yes.
And with your really amazing background, and it is true, boards like to have more women, and they should. How do you evaluate, and how did we get so lucky? What was it about Google, besides being founded at the same time, that made you interested?
I feel very fortunate to be on Google's board, and I think boards are looking for people that have technology background. They're looking for women. They're looking for qualified financial experts. And so when you can check all three, it puts you in a good position to get board seats. But at this point, I'm full up. I'm not joining any boards.
We're not soliciting any. But I think it must be a hard choice then. If you have a lot of options, and I'm sure you have many good options, you only have so much time. So.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think Google is one of the most interesting and best companies in the world, and I was not looking to join a board when Google came up, but it was a board that I have so much admiration for the founders of Google, the CEO of Google, and then Google as a company and what it's accomplishing and where it wants to go and what its values are, that it was, an opportunity I wanted.
Terrific.
Yeah.
We have a couple questions from Google Moderator. One just came on from someone with the initials DS in Texas, which I asked a little bit, but I think people are very interested in this, which is, how did you keep yourself technical as you moved up the management chain? A lot of people at Google, I think, especially in engineering, get worried about this. Did you keep yourself as technical?
Well, I have to say I haven't written any code in a little while, more than a little while. I do find it really important to be able to would sort of check myself. I would pick up technical specs every now and then and read them and make sure I could understand them. And when I was finding myself, maybe I didn't know the acronyms, or maybe there was an underlying mechanism that I didn't understand how it worked, I would go find technical people to explain it to me, because it was a huge advantage, particularly in the partnering, to have technical depth. And when you're negotiating with people about how something might work, if you have technical depth, you can negotiate it in a way that it's likely to have a lot more success. And so, and plus it's more fun to understand what you're talking about.
Seems like a good practice.
Yeah.
That's great. Do you have any
Yeah,
questions on
I guess
that?
another question I have is kind of two questions but related. One is for people who are new to management roles or leadership roles, and especially for women, I wonder about what kind of advice you would give them when they sort of take a pretty important career change. Then there is a flip side of the question is for companies who wants to grow women as a leader and management, as a sort of a talent pool for the company. What do you think the company can do to help grow the women talent, both in leadership as well as in the management roles?
This isn't exactly answering your question, but you just reminded me of something I always did at VMware when I was in a room in a meeting, and there would be women in the meeting, and they didn't have to stay there. But I found that they would always enjoy it, and once they'd experienced it, they would start taking they would realize it was fun and rewarding to take the lead on some things. So that was something I used to try and do consciously. I was always very interested in any women that were in leadership roles or in engineering, just sort of checking in with them. Because you just sort of naturally feel an alliance with them. But in terms of going into management, I think in management I've always thought of myself as, when I'm in management, my job is to make everybody successful. I'm there to serve them. They're the lucky ones. I'm working like a dog to make them successful. And so I have to communicate a lot to them so they can do their jobs well. I have to coordinate and facilitate and really lay the infrastructure so that they can be successful. And I think that's advice for any manager, of course, not just women. But I think the biggest thing is to just focus on what you're trying to accomplish, and don't let those nagging confidence or fear things kind of creep in there, and just keep your eye on what you're trying to accomplish, and keep your bar really high.
That's great.
But that confidence piece can be very important.
Yes.
And
you have to practice it.
And then one question, which I know you get probably a lot, I certainly get it a lot, which is, how do you do it all? How did you found a very successful company and raise 2 children, and sounds like you and your husband were both working, so that's challenging. I think the answer is different for everybody, but it is possible is the first thing, because you're proof of that.
Yeah.
But any learnings or tips or,
Yeah, I think you're consciously making compromises when you're trying to work full-time and raise your children. And as long as you kind of accept that there's going to be compromises, you can optimize for what's important to you. So, being home for dinner with my kids was really important to me, and that was sort of how I set the culture of VMware, so that I, and being, at special school things was very important, so I'd make a big show of that if I had to leave to go, and if I wanted to leave and go and visit the school for some reason. But at the same time, after my kids were in bed, I was on email to the point where people would say, "Could you just not send emails in the middle of the night, Diane?" And I was like, "Oh, okay. I don't know. I'll save it up till the work day starts." But so, I threw a lot of energy into being able to do things, across the entire day, unless I was asleep. But I did prioritize. It's sort of arbitrary how many hours are in a day, so you kind of have to make a decision about which hours you're going to put into things that are not work related.
Yeah.
And how you balance those.
But technology is actually a great field in terms of some of that flexibility. Many people at Google, men and women, do get online at different times and maybe leave early if their child has something at school and then get back online. I feel lucky I can do that. And
yeah, that's absolutely right. And then where you can, if you can, use your salary to have food
help.
that's already made so that you're not having to, you'd rather be with your kids interacting than maybe cooking dinner or something like, or cleaning the house. So I definitely used my salary to leverage my time.
So you were only doing the high value, the things that you wanted to do.
Yeah.
That certainly resonates a lot with me. With you?
Yeah,
yes?
definitely, yes.
I think the thing is that this is for parents, not just for women. I mean, the president makes a point of going to all of his school meetings, right, for his children.
Right.
I think if leadership sends a message that, hey, you have priorities at work, you have priorities at home, and being public about the fact that when you make choices or to go and be with your kids, is
and
a
when
good,
people
example.
aren't happy if they're giving short shrift to their family.
Yeah.
And you're not productive if you're not happy. So I think it's actually a good trade-off.
I think it's a good trend. I'd like to see more of it. I think we only have time for maybe one or two more questions. Okay. Do we have any final
maybe I'll ask another technology
Okay.
So, cloud is, that's something very dear and close to my heart. But, clearly there are many other technologies that are changing people's life every day. In addition to cloud computing, what are some of the other technologies that you're really excited about these days?
The other, I have to say, I don't want to be a Google ad, but I sure enjoyed driving in the Google driverless car recently. Can't wait to get one.
Oh my God.
Isn't it surprisingly normal? Like you're just in a car, it's driving itself.
But in terms of, just taking it back to technology, I think human-computer interaction, I think having the use of computers be human-centered rather than how it's been as sort of top-down from the application. It's a major shift facilitated by cloud, facilitated by mobile, facilitated by the sensors, facilitated by being able to integrate the processors in ways we haven't done before. Is just radically improving what we're going to be able to do as humans, and it's really exciting to be part of that.
Are you working on new projects?
Well, I have a new project
that is a secret.
We'll see where it goes. It's pretty, junior.
But you're basically a serial entrepreneur.
Well, I basically like creating things and building things. Yeah.
Were you like that when you were young?
Yeah, I was always putting on a play or starting a team or making a kayak I was always build a dark room. Yeah, I was always doing things. Yeah.
That's right. So that's what gets you going.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, embarking on a new project, does it feel like I can't believe I'm doing this again, or you just get new energy and new ideas?
I'm really happy to be doing it again, but it's difficult because I've got myself committed to a lot of other things, and in the past when I've started a new project, I didn't really it was something new that I was going to do next without anything else going on. So this is an interesting
every
challenge
time it's
for
different.
Me. Yeah.
Do you have a team? Are you recruiting people? Are you I'm not looking, just to be clear, Google. But
I have a few people that I'm working with on some ideas.
That's pretty exciting.
But it's fun, but we'll see. Yeah.
Well, that's
but it's just, I also think it's just wonderful to have a group of people that you have a long-term relationship with, where day in, day out you're developing and building something new. That I think that's just extremely rewarding.
Yes, I agree.
That sort of continuity.
So any other closing thought you want to share with developers and engineers out there that we haven't covered today?
Just that I think we're all really lucky to be doing what we're doing at this point in time, and I think it's wonderful that it's becoming much more balanced from a gender basis. It's really fun to be sitting here with two women talking about technology, and so just go and make sure you enjoy yourself.
That's great.
It's great work to do.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Diane Greene, and thank you all who tuned in for our 4th episode of Women Tech Makers. Have a great day.
Thank you. Okay.